And there are multiple ways, and we can get to that, multiple ways. And if you've done this a bunch, Claire's been here a while, Susan, Amy, if you have a specific way that you like to do it with your agencies, there are multiple ways that you can get the SAR input and complete. But the point of this document is to identify the agency and PMT, which I'll show you. Identify what type of agency they are, their award number, and we're breaking down where their expectation of services will lie for the course of the year, and we're breaking that down by dollar amount. So if you have a contract that was, a lot of you these days, a lot of you now have like 7 contracts for one agency, and one's VOCA DV and one's VOCA SA. That VOCA DV, if it was funded as VOCA domestic violence, those funds should go to that primary victimization, which is domestic violence. And if they were VOCA SA, it should go to their primary, which is sexual assault. They will probably, along the course of the year, have secondary victimizations, which they can account for in their quarterly PMT. But I think the way we settled on this, and Jeremiah, correct me, but I think the way we settled on this in OELT the other day was that it's their primary designation that their application was funded under. So if it was domestic violence, it should go under domestic violence, sexual assault, or child abuse, or if they were under a VOCA underserved, they should have their funds under underserved. Am I stating that correctly, Jeremiah?
Yeah, you absolutely are, particularly for the newer people. We have certain thresholds that we have to meet for VOCA. So when we go out with an underserved solicitation and say we figure we're going to get $300,000 worth of grants, that's $300,000 we're putting 100% towards underserved in order to meet that threshold. And so when an agency is funded under a specific solicitation like that, and they go, well, we do so much underserved, but maybe also some BV and maybe also some child abuse, it really throws off our ability to meet the thresholds. And so we really want them to focus on the primary victimization of the solicitation that they came in under for the SAR. So for an underserved solicitation, it would be underserved. For DV, domestic violence, for sexual assault, SA, child abuse is typically our CACs. We don't really have a child abuse solicitation outside of those, though we do have a few projects that focus on it. But it should be pretty evident from the solicitation kind of where things need to go. And then some other solicitations, there may be a little bit of flexibility. But have any supervisor, ask myself or Jennifer or Dana, and we can help guide you there.
Valerie, did you say you sent me a SAR? It hadn't come through yet. If you did,
sorry, no, I just sent like a sample email to Amy about getting SARs in. I have some, but they've already been entered. Otherwise, I would send it to you to show everybody. But I've already done the one.
I can go in and we can just pull up a SAR. We don't necessarily have to input one. Melanie, go ahead and send me that Safe Court one. It's going to be rather simple in the sense that I think we're going to put all that in underserved, but we'll talk that through together. If you want to send that to me, Melanie, that might be easiest for everybody, we work through one together. But so when you send this document to the agency and they send it back, be mindful of that, where they've accounted for their funds and understanding that. And I say that because I just monitored an agency that I inherited from Jason that they were supposed to be doing domestic violence. They were doing a lot more than domestic violence with the funds, and their SAR had monies in all the categories. And that should have been a trigger to me last year. Oh, hey, why do they have money in all 5 categories when they're supposed to be just doing domestic violence? So, that just being mindful of that. And then if you see that they're breaking it down, letting them know, hey, you do understand that your primary is X, and just, not that they're in trouble, but just making sure they understand that, because this agency, although they just renewed this contract in the past 2 years, failed to recognize that. So that was super awesome. Their project start and end dates. And then the next section is breaking down these funds. So if they're in child abuse, I think that we are not putting anything in C1. I believe that was our instruction. Child abuse goes under child abuse, sexual assault, physical abuse. Sexual assault is only the adult sexual assault component. So all your child sexual assault should go under the child abuse category under A2. So just make sure that they've done that correctly. But they're, again, in this section, just breaking down what those funds are. Underserved, if they had $10,000, what of that $10,000 is their expectation? And if for the VOCA elder abuse solicitation, you would expect to see, if their contract was $100,000, $100,000 for underserved and $100,000 in elder abuse, because that's their primary objective, victimization under the solicitation. So, this is just a document that we send them, that when you get it back, you review it. For VOCA, there's no match right now. Valerie had a good question about that, and I'll show you when we start inputting one, or if we just look at one online. You will put 0, and there is a actual button in PMT, a little checkbox, and we're going to click that for match waiver, since VOCA does not have match right now. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And then they will need to tell us.
Hey, Renee, can you go back to 7 for 1 second?
Sure.
Well, no, it's actually 6. I'm so sorry. So just for our new people, agencies struggle with this, how to break out this money, because it is a projection. They don't know in advance how many clients of each victimization type they're going to serve. But unless it's a brand new project, they can kind of refer back to previous years and how that broke out. So that's just kind of like a tip. If you get emails from agencies and they're like, well, how do I know how much of my $10,000 in underserved I should break out between D1 and D7? They can look at previous years. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have to break it out further than the D. They can leave it all in D, or do they have to break it out?
They have to break it out for D.
For D, they do, right?
All the other ones, they don't.
Right.
But they do for D.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Renee.
You're welcome. And again, you're just estimating or projecting the dollar spent and equating that to victim served. So, if they're a brand new project and they don't quite know, but they're not elder abuse specific, they're just all DV, all underserved, they could start with, kind of just breaking that out equally. And we can always go back and update this document if we need to. Although it does inform some reports that Robin pulled. Although I don't think we have any federal designations for underserved other than just underserved. I don't think there's a robbery underserved designation we have to meet. So that can be somewhat subjective, especially if they're a brand new project. Additionally,
that's correct.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, anyone who really paid attention to the underserved solicitation, you would note that the categories we listed in that solicitation as preferred generally align with these subcategories. And for example, we've got a grant with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and they're going to put basically all of their money in that underserved DUI, DWI field.
But you may have some Rachel, victim coordinators who can do all crime. They may have to just divvy it up equally to start the year if there are no brand new projects, but let's say there were. If not, they could go back and look at who they served in totality for FY22 and be able to equate that to percentages in dollars. I know it's math and nobody really likes math, but it can be done, and they should be looking at doing that as part of their data collection. But that's a soapbox for another day from me. Then we get into number 9, and then this feeds into when we're checking our PMT reports, but they need to tell us or check. And then, when we're in the system, again, there's several ways we can input this, but they need to tell us on the front end, what information referral do they expect to do? For a victim witness coordinator project, I expect every single one of these to be clicked. My expectation would be that they would be doing every single one of these things. That may not be the expectation of a different type of program. But that's my expectation of it. I'm trying to think of, but then you have personal advocacy and accompaniment. There are going to be some of these that I would not expect a victim witness coordinator to do, but I would expect, a SANE nursing program to do, or a law enforcement program to do, or a legal aid program to do, those sorts of things. So they should be, checking boxes that are applicable to their program. Emotional support, I wouldn't see this in a victim coordinator, but you may see these, with the exception of maybe safety planning. But, maybe your DV agencies are probably going to be heavy in the emotional support, checking these boxes. And shelter and housing services, if it's a transitional, if it's a shelter agency or transitional housing agency, you would expect to see these checked as well. So really just making sure that they've checked the boxes appropriate to their program. And if they have crisis intervention, I had a couple of victim coordinator programs that checked that because they did work safety planning with the clients, and that's allowable. But you wouldn't want a legal aid agency to be checking emergency shelter or safe house. That's not the intent of that question. It's not, hey, did you refer them to an emergency shelter? Well, that's good. That's covered up here under referrals to other service agencies. You as a victim coordinator of the DA's office are not providing emergency shelter or safe housing. So you would not be checking that, so that that the agency understands what is being asked of them when it comes to this. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah, and this is a great thing to check against their scope. Like, what they wrote in their scope of services is what they said they would provide. So that's what we're buying with our federal dollars here. So if it's in the scope, it should be in the SAR as well.
And then when they, it's a lot to think about when you're doing 50 PMT quarterly reports, but if they're supposed to go in and check A, B, C, D, or E as it applies to their agency, and then they're supposed to answer when those populate the number of services they gave per category. So, making sure that it all tracks is basically what I'm saying. It should all track from the SAR to the PMT reports.
Yeah, and Amy used a really good word that's probably not trauma-informed, but it's good for the purposes of checking the report in terms of buying. All of these VOCA reports, specifically the SAR, is literally tracking what the individual dollars do. So as Renee and Amy have stated, programs are a lot of times inclined to go through here and check anything, and sometimes do some like gymnastics in terms of how they can fit one of the categories into something that they're doing, even though it doesn't really apply. So a good way to ground them is just to tell them that we're really looking at what the specific dollar does directly. So is the dollar providing civil legal assistance in obtaining protections or restraining orders? If it's just a referral, like Renee said, that's handled under the referral section. So I think the referral to other stuff is how we typically wind up with a lot of erroneous stuff checked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you overthink it. Well, I'm referring them, but that's referral. That's not actually taking that action. And then we've had a lot of red lines lately, just a sidebar, with our PMT reports, and that should correlate to A, B, C, D, and E that they check on their PMT reports, and only checking those categories which apply. I would not expect a victim coordinator grant to have any. Okay, my mouse is suddenly not working. Have anything in D. So when they're going through their PMT report, they should not be checking D, because they should not have any entries to populate down in D. And we've been getting red lines for that because they're checking D, they're putting nothing in D. And now the federal government's starting to go, whoa, 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 you checked D, but you didn't respond that you did anything in D. That's a red line. So just being able to communicate that with the agencies from start, from the SAR on, and hopefully help us reduce our red lines as well. For F, everybody has to click assist potential recipients in seeking crime victim compensation benefits. This is not the filling out of the, helping them fill out the form. This is that everybody under VOCA should be made aware that victims compensation exists. And that's just a requirement of VOCA. So they do have to, everybody has to check that, even if they're not planning on assisting people with the actual filling out of the criminal injuries compensation packet.
Yeah, going a little bit into the weeds on F, the reason why that's a checkbox is because it is technically optional in the VOCA program for that assistance to be provided with VOCA dollars, but in the state of Tennessee, it is not optional. All of our VOCA programs must do it, which is why everyone checks F. But Arizona may have projects that don't do it, so that's why it's a checkbox, because it's a national report. But in Tennessee, all of our programs must do that.
Oh, it will actually kick it back to you if you don't check it, Jeremiah, and say it's required, that you have to check it.
Well, then
They
I
might
stand
have
corrected.
expanded that, but yeah, if you don't check that box, it won't allow you to approve submit the report. And then they need to be clicking types of victimization. I say that first and foremost, they should have their primary victimization checked. I don't know, Jeremiah, if we want to allow them to include secondary victimizations on this or not, or if that's too much in the weeds for agencies to be able to decipher. But, for sure, if it's a VOCA DV program, they should have a checkbox next to domestic and family violence. We can keep with the theme that, I think in past years, we've allowed them to just check any of their expectation to serve, including secondary victimizations. If we want to keep with the theme that we're only doing the primary, we can make that change this year. Thoughts and feelings on that, guys?
I just feel like this is a place, again, where people get really click happy and they feel like, I don't know, like they have more value the more boxes they check. We really just want you to check what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it's one box, just check that. So I don't know, I guess Jeremiah, if you can just let us know if you want us to allow them to. I'm fine with secondary victimization types too, but I think as program managers, we have to look at it and be like, does that really make sense that they check that box? And then, we can kind of talk to the agency about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think at this moment we're wanting to necessarily change the way in which agencies have been entering the reports. So to the extent that their agency does deal in regularly in secondary victimizations, I think that it could make sense to check it. But like Amy said, we don't want them checking everything. And you could have an agency that says, well, we checked kidnapping non-custodial because this one year we did have this case and it was crazy and blah blah blah. So we have done that before. It's like, yeah, but that's really an outlier, right? Like when you look at the thousands of cases that you've done, and that's one of them, that's an outlier. We really want you to focus on what the grant is intending to pay for. And so the types of victimization that you would regularly deal with.
I will say, this is Katie. I will piggyback on what Jeremiah just said in the sense of I help human trafficking programs, and they tended to get in the weeds a lot with secondary victimization, and not really focusing on just the human trafficking victimization, which they are currently funded for. And they were using a lot of those outliers. And so the numbers were just not really meshing when they were doing the reporting. So just an example of how that can get out of hand with programs sometimes.
Yeah, it can also get out of hand with the other, where they're able to just type in and they'll just go and type in all kinds of stuff. And so if you, if they, I guess you can just see what they put and talk to them about it. But sometimes you just get a lot of money put into that other, and then also like other underserved, non-violent, and then I think there's violent, which is separate. And so you may want to talk to them ahead of time about whether or not it will make sense for their program to be typing in things into other.
And then this gets hairy. There's always a lot of discussion on this. But it's their budget and staffing, question number 11. So their total budget for all victimization program services for this agency. So that's all of them. That's not just this contract, unless this contract is their only budget, their only budgeted items for victimization from the agency. It's the total budget for all victimization programs for this subgrantee. Sorry, there's a fly like buzzing around my head, not just making weird hand gestures. And it includes the subaward. So, if they have a $50,000 grant for DUI, but their whole agency deals with DUI, maybe in the case of Matt, that might be their agency budget for the year. It includes all of it. But if you have an agency, and this is VOCA DV, but they have VOCA SA and they have human trafficking and they have all this stuff, it may just be the VOCA DV grant that is captured in A, because these other grant programs aren't serving the same victims as the VOCA DV. Well, they could be the same victim, but you know what I mean. One is DV, one's SA, one's human trafficking, one's transitional housing. But then you will break down in B, the subaward amount, any other state or territory money that they get, local, federal, or other non-federal that they get for this type of victimization. So there's some instructions here, but identify by source the amount of funds allocated to the victimization programs, services, budgets of the subgrantee agency. And other federal includes all federal funding except the subaward amount. So trying to think of a good example would be maybe a coordinator agency. Maybe this is a county contract. So this is the only victim coordinator contract for the county. So that would be an A, and the subaward would then be C1. But then they have other state or territory money, probably for state victim coordinators. So they would have to put that money here. If they had one county and 3 state funded employees, that the subaward amount would be the county funded employee under this SAR. And then they have 3 other positions which are funded to do similar work from TNDIGC. I'm not sure what other local would be. Other federal could be a direct grant from the federal government, or other non-federal. I'm not sure. Has anybody who's been around a while had somebody who's done other local or other non-federal and has an example?
Yeah. So at Metro Nashville, or not, sorry, not Metro, the YW, they received money from Metro Nashville. And so that was considered other local. Yeah.
And I think other non-federal can be like Baptist Healing Trust or something like that.
Or just their general fundraising.
Yeah. And it should be noted that when you add up C1 through C5, that should equal their response in A, because A is the total victimization budget for all victimization programs, and then they're breaking it out by what type of funding it is. So if you add up C1 through C5, it should equal what they said in A, and if it doesn't, it's wrong.
Yeah. Then you can email them and go, it's wrong. This is wrong.
This is definitely the hardest one for the folks that I have.
It is.
Did we not have a Word document that gave more information on this section from last year?
We do, and I've been looking for it, Claire, and I'll make sure to email it to everyone after this, or I can put it in the meeting. Is that helpful?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
I wonder if it was, no, that wasn't that. Yeah, I don't know if I have that, Amy.
It's
But
from
yeah,
the
you have it
PMT
included in the
system.
meeting.
It's from the PMT system that I downloaded before, so I'll try and find that and get it to everyone. It really does break down these questions just a little bit further, because there's some, instructions on the right here, but overall you need just a little bit more like what qualifies for this. So.
And then you have total number of paid staff for all subgrantee victimization programs in our services. So I think all staff, and do not prorate based on FTE. So it would be whole number. So you wouldn't have, if the agency had five full-time people and 1 half-time person, I think you would just put 6 there. I would round up instead of round down to capture that half person, but it's for all paid staff for all subgrantee program services.
So any direct service staff is going there.
Direct service staff, yeah. And the number of staff hours funded through this VOCA award plus match, which we don't have anymore for this. So that would be, a full-time person is what, 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours per staff person if they were a 40-hour work week at 52 weeks per year. So just making sure that that seems about right. And
Well,
then
don't the hours go in D though, right? And
sorry,
you're
I didn't
you were
highlight.
highlighted. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
That's okay. I didn't move my highlight. Thank you. And then number of volunteers supporting the work of this VOCA award. As we know, agencies are required to have volunteers, but the volunteers are not required to do direct service. So the answer could be 0 in supporting the work of this VOCA award. But when you're out monitoring, you should be ensuring that the agency does use volunteers at their agency. We're just looking at, this question is just asking if they're, I think, doing direct services or supporting the work of this specific VOCA award. But if they're just there mopping floors on the weekends for a couple of hours and not doing direct service, I don't think that would count. For the purpose of E. It would count for the purpose of monitoring, though. And again, you would translate that into hours. If you had 3 volunteers who work 8 hours a week times 52 weeks a year, they would just need to translate that hourly work supporting this VOCA award into hours. Oh, hey, there's an appendix. I wonder if it's, no, it's just a victimization appendix. So any questions on that? The E is going to trip everybody up. Just, if you have questions about that, ask your supervisor, ask me. If you're new, if you've been here a while, it might still trip you up. So no shame in that if there's a question. All right.
I think this is information under our current situation, but the volunteer, am I breaking up?
Yeah, you're breaking up. I was making sure it wasn't just me, but you're breaking up.
Okay, we can go on. I was just talking. Thank you.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mean, you always have important things to say, Jeremiah.
I don't know if Rachel actually asked it, but her question in the chat was, what would you expect a general victims witness coordinator to check? I think y'all answered that though, didn't you?
And that was when we were under the victimization.
Yeah,
I would say they're primary. If they're DV, we have a handful that are DV specific. If they are underserved, they should at least be checking the boxes where they put money in the underserved. So if they said, $2,000 in underserved for assault or what is elder abuse or whatever, they should have that box checked down here as well.
But like your law enforcement victim coordinators, since they're non-specific, they're one of the ones that could be all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're in, I'm just going to create one under this profile. We can walk through it. But does everybody know, okay, when you log into PMT, you go to the SAR sub-grantee list and you find your agency's name. I'm going to go into Anderson County just because I work with them a lot. If I screw it up, I don't mind emailing them and telling them, hey, I screwed it up. Don't respond to that email. If you need to change the point of contact's name and email and phone number, this is the screen that you do that in. And my understanding is all you do is update it, hit save and continue, and it should auto-generate an email to that person's email that you put in where they can create their username and login information. So there's no, you're not fiddling with inside the SAR, inside of any reporting. You're just changing that point of contact right here on this page and hitting save and continue. And so if you can see, this is the history of their SARs broken down by subaward number, the amount, the project date, the federal awards that they were funded under, and if they were approved, or if they're deleted, they'll be up here at the top and there'll be a note right here. And just to tell you that that's what everybody on my team has probably nightmares about doing the SAR stuff. and Excel documents and SARS and all this stuff, but this is how we track awards and expenditures so that our federal program manager can see where we're at. That's how they gauge where we're at on our spending per award. So I can actually export the entirety of our SAR information for Robin and then sort it by which fund source, which fund years we want to look at and give that information to her. So it's important that we have the information in there and that it's correct, so that when we send out, when I send that information to Robin, or like last year, year before last, we got stuck in training with the federal government, one of their contractors, because we weren't expending the 2018 $60-something million during a pandemic like they wanted us to. And part of that, they had looked at what we had in PMT and our expenditures in there as part of their justification for us to attend that technical assistance with that contracted provider. So all that to say, we've done a review. My team and I have done a review. I think I've captured every SAR that should be in here to date, not ones that start, 6:30 or 7:1. But we should be good on last year's. But just making that statement of the importance of having the SARS in here, because it does directly go to our federal program manager and she can see it. And Dana does get questions about it. So let's make Dana's life slightly easier. All you have to do, so let's say that you had this Word document, you send it to your agencies and you're like, whatever's in the body of your email, I can draft up a sample for you, Valerie, if you want to share your sample. You want to make it in your own words, but here's your subgrantee. Oh, I forgot what SAR stands for, but anyway, here's your SAR for FY 2023, the blank form. Please fill this out and send it back to me by X date. And you get it back and you've looked it over and everything looks good to go. You're like, yeah, sweet. They finally know this is an agency that knows what they're doing. Or it's a super simple one where they don't have to break down as much stuff. You take that document and there's at least two different ways that I have input the SAR. The first one is adding the subaward, which we're fixing to do, and putting in the, I think we put in the first part, which is part 1. And then you can save that and then you can let the agency know, hey, part 2 is ready for you to do. You should input the information that you gave me on this form, exactly how it is on this form. I think in the past few years, I have given them the form, I have gotten the form back, and I've just done the whole thing in PMT for them and approved it and saved it based on, the Word document that they sent me being correct. So really, it's up to you. I think last year we had a discussion about it. I don't think that we have any specific preference as an office as to how you do it. I think I just found it easier for them to do it, me to review it, and me just to put it in PMT, but that may not work for you. Does anybody do it differently or have thoughts and feelings about which way is better? Claire?
I put it in for them.
Yeah.
I did it that way the first couple of years, gave up. It's too hard.
Yep.
It's too much back and forth.
Agree.
I agree. I do it the same way. I used to do the part 1, part 2, but it's just easier to do it at the same time and look at it once rather than having to go back in.
So I'm just going to create one for Anderson County. I'll delete it when I'm done. Remind me. I'm just going to use their stuff from last year because it's not going to change, quite honestly. I'm so sorry for last year. I'll do 2 years ago. Look at me, not doing my job. All right, so nothing has changed in this contract, but let's say that this is their Word document. They've sent it back to me and I've decided that it's good to be entered. I'm in their profile. Their point of contact is all good. So now what I want to do is add subaward. And this is literally the Word document, but just in PMT. So we would look at their, if it's new, if they don't have a contract, if it's brand new, it's perfectly acceptable to put new. You will just need to remember to check back in 60 to 90 days when OBF finishes processing the contract and gives it a contract number. So maybe in October when you go in and pull their PMT reports, to go in and add their state assigned subaward number in replacement of new. But it's perfectly acceptable right now if you have brand new contracts that don't have contract numbers to just put new. I'm going to keep it as new so Rachel and I know that this is not one that we need to keep going forward. We are in 2019 funds at this point, so everything should be VOCA-wise in 2019 unless Jeremiah has instructions that I haven't heard yet. Their subaward for this is going to be one domestic violence prosecutor and the other is going to be any. So the way that they have broken this down is 130,000 is their total subaward. And they have broken it down to 20,000, 70,000, 20,000 and 20,000. And basically what they've done, that's 2,000 in it. Okay. Basically what they've done is they've put that whole person that's just domestic violence at 50 grand in domestic violence and then split up that person that can do any of them, you know, equally among the others. It will auto calculate for you right here. So this number should equal this number. If it doesn't, it will give you an error message. If you try to toggle or move forward, it will give you an error message, but that it does auto calculate. So you can tell, okay, it matches, it's equal. Bit of a caveat here, just because why not? You know, your projects, most of them, if they're brand new, they'll start July 1 of this year. If they're continuations, if they're projects that were funded last year, they would start June 30th. Not July 1. So there would not be a lag or a day in between the project ending and the project start date. So it would end 6/30, start 6/30. If it's a brand new contract, it would start July 1. Issue with project end date. All right, right now, I think Melanie's the one that caught this. We would say that this project would end June 30th of 2023. But you notice there's no 2023 drop down. That is because PMT has not yet processed all of the 2019 extensions. So at this point, we are going to have to put September 30th for all of them, which is the original end date for the 2019 award, to avoid any errors and allow you to put this in. What this means is on or before September 30th of 2022, somebody, and probably my team, will have to go in and update all of these project end dates. My hope is that between now and August 1st, when y'all start getting these back from the agencies, because they have 30 days to give them to us, we have about 30 to 45 days to get them input into PMT. My hope is that this will be fixed by then, and then we won't have to go back and redo all these project end dates. Excuse me. So my suggestion is don't run out today and start putting in all your SARs, because then you're just going to have to go back in and update the project end date. But Renee T did email with OVC and they're working on it. So that's helpful.
Can I just say one thing about that, Renee?
Sure.
That is an area that if you ever have because sometimes we will forget to go back and change that because we forget it was even an issue. And so some random time you'll have an agency say, hey, I can't enter my PMT. And you're like, what? You always do your PMT. What's wrong? And I guarantee you that is the issue. And so, you know, it will essentially like cut them off from being able to do a PMT until that date is changed. Then all of a sudden it opens up more PMTs. So, yeah, you know, if you ever have this random time where someone tells you they can't enter their PMT, that is likely the issue is that date.
Yeah, because PMT will only generate a report needed during the time frame that's stated between the project start and project end date. So that's a great point, Susan. Then you need to choose if it's continuing. So if you have, you know, new VOCA DV contract, but it's not a new project, it's just a new contract, you would continue a VOCA funded project. You could also expand, or if it's a brand new project, start up. We would never use D&E because we don't have any Native American or tribal set aside in Tennessee. So you would choose between A, B, and C. For a lot of you, it's going to be continuing a VOCA funded project, even though it's a new contract. It was a program that existed and we funded last year. They're just getting a new contract this year. The information that we input up here then translates down here. And you can see that from what Amy was saying, A, B, and C, these amounts are optional. I always put a 0. Well, no, don't do that anymore. That's going to trigger something. When it says optional, you don't have to do a breakdown. If the agency has given you a breakdown, you would want to put that. You know, if they said, well, we do 10,000 in child physical abuse and 10,000 in child sexual assault, you would want to put that in there, and it auto calculates for you and will tell you, hey, that doesn't add up. Domestic and family violence has no breakdown. Same thing for sexual assault. We would not put anything in child sexual assault. We would put everything in adult sexual assault. They do have to break down underserved. And I probably have the breakdown here unless people want to do math. It looks like they put 20,000, let's see, 10,000 in assault. So you have to put a 0. 10,000 in assault. 0, 10,000 in underserved. Elder abuse. Nothing for anything else. If they do have monies in this other underserved, other violent crimes, they need to give a description of what that is. And we need to make sure it's not something that's already stated up here. As Claire said, they like the other. They like to write for other. And the other underserved nonviolent crimes, again, just a description here as well, just to make sure it's not captured in another area. So this is the end of part 1, which I said, you know, at this point, you could kick it back to the agency. It sounds like a unanimous decision that we just want them to send us the Word document and we will put it in for you to save us all a lot of time and headache. So at this point, you would hit save and continue, and it would bring you up to part 2, which should give you their service areas. They should not be serving any counties outside of the state, unless maybe one's in Bristol, but that would be an outlier probably. Again, like I said, 0 in match. And you would click this button here for match waiver. And that's that for all VOCA ones this year. So that's pretty easy. Then this is where you're just transferring. Huh?
On part 1, you touched on this, but I just wanted to emphasize it. Unless they fixed it, and I don't think they have because you just emphasized it. If you don't put the zeros in, when you go to submit, it's going to give you an error about like lacking match or lacking funding in categories or not adding. I can't remember what. And 90% of the time, that's the issue, is there's not a 0.
In D, yeah. In D specifically. The others, A and C won't, but in D specifically, if there's not a fund amount in a D breakdown, you have to put 0 error. It will not allow you to move forward.
Question, Renee. In 1, I don't know if you did or not. Did you select something for the subaward purpose?
Yeah, for most of these, it's already set because it's under their profile. But this would have been, I think, prosecutor. But the subaward purpose, I think, is set in their profile. So you're talking about this right here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3 are all their base profiles. So quite honestly, that should not change from what's already in there. And then you're adding, you click add the subaward, and you're starting with question number 4. But pay attention. That's right, Melanie. Pay attention in that if their point of contact's name is changed, you may need to update the profile in the SAR profile.
No, on the go back to part 1 on your PMT. The checkbox. It's a go back up though.
Number 5.
Yeah, number
I
5.
think.
Number 5.
Oh, yep. You're right. It gave me a trigger. at y'all paying attention.
I just done
I
it.
figured my voice would have put you to sleep by now. Okay. So then this should correlate to everything we just talked about. Let me show you this one from, going back to what Rachel asked. The expectation, I expect to see all of these checked because as a victim coordinator organization, I expect, this one to be the only one checked under personal individual advocacy. I expect under C, only crisis intervention, and again, only because of safety planning. But going back to our whole conversation, which I won't have all over again, making sure that it correlates to the type of project you have. I don't expect anything in D, and I expect several in E, the notification, victim impact, victim assistance, which all makes sense for a victim coordinator project, prosecution interview, and criminal advocacy accompaniment. So that all makes sense for this type of project. And again, it says required here. They have to click, or you have to click if you're putting this in for them. And then I'm just going to click, let's see, they had elder abuse, domestic violence, and adult sexual assault, I believe, as their 3 categories. And so just making sure that that correlates with the type of project they have. As you can see, they've clicked more on here. It makes sense. It depends on, I guess we landed on they could do secondary victimizations on this. For the purpose of this one that we're going to delete, I'm just going to pick 3. So the system will let us move forward. So any questions on that before we get to, and I'll have to make sure I did this right. Any questions on that before we get to number 11? Okay, it auto-populated the subaward amount for us. They're saying that their total agency budget, oh my gosh, they did this right, $269,106. The subaward has been auto-populated, so they're also saying their other state and territory is $139,106, which is more than likely going to be state-funded victim witness coordinators in the Anderson County office, but they don't have any other federal, non-federal, or local. Their number of paid staff is 3.
Hey, Renee, can I ask a question before we move on? So this is Anderson County, so it's a good example. I've got a lot of agencies that are like bigger government, city, county. Are we expecting them to do the budget for all victimization programs for the county? Because like that would be a lot of different programming types that they would have to coordinate with other departments, and I never know what to tell them.
Programs that they are aware of that fall under their purview that also work with the similar victimization. So I wouldn't expect, Metro Action Commission to know what the Sheriff's Department has going on, but I would expect Metro Action Commission to know what Metro Action Commission has going on.
Mm-hmm. So like maybe more of the implementing agency.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes implementing agency is still just for the FJCs. It's still just the county or the city, but I just don't know whether or not I'm supposed to be asking them to look beyond the FJC.
That's doing the work of the project. So there's no expectation, I think, that the FJC would know what the jail is doing or would know what the, public works is doing or anything like that. I think it has to be within reason. Jeremiah, I don't know if you can state it better than me or have different thoughts on that. But for example, on this one, it looks like they have 2 paid positions through this grant and 2 paid positions through TNDAGC in the DA's office. But that's not accounting for if Anderson County has I'm sure Anderson County gets other funding for victimizations, but the expectation wouldn't be that Dave Clark would know that information outside of just the DA's office.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like specific to FJCs and larger governments, I think you're really just looking at the FJC, not the bigger entity. This kind of sort of coincides with our other grant funds form, where it's really specific to kind of the program and the agency rather than kind of the entire entity.
Okay.
And then you have the total number of paid staff for, so they have 3. Hours funded, they have 4,332 through this FOCA grant, which makes sense because they have 2 paid employees at 2,000 hours a year full time. And then the number of volunteers, they have 0 because I know just from auditing them, they have volunteers. None of their volunteers do direct service work. And then volunteer hours, it would again be 0. And then I don't think I've ever used the overall comments optional section, but if you have, you can feel free to give us an example. Most of the time, by the time you get to this point, after doing 50, you don't have any additional comments that you want to add. You just want to hit save and continue and roll on. But any questions?
Yeah, there's one in the chat that could you reiterate when a 6:30 start date is used versus a 7/1?
Sure. A 6:30 start date would be if you had a contract that's ongoing. So let's say you have a victim services contract that started in FY21 and ends in FY25. That would start 6:30 every year. But then in FY26, if they were to get a brand new contract for the same work, it would start 7/1. Did I make that more confusing? I might have. The only time it's 7/1 is when it's a brand new contract.
That makes sense. That's my question, Renee. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Trying to state it in the least confusing way possible, and that's not how my brain works.
Okay, Renee, I got a question.
Sure.
So since we're doing contract switcheroos, I'm assuming that we go ahead and do just, if we currently hold the agency, go ahead and do their SAR with them, right?
I would go ahead and send it to them because they do have a deadline to meet.
Yeah.
I would hold it maybe until after the 1st of August, just on the off chance that PMT updates the system.
Okay, that's what I was
that
thinking.
Might mean that the next person might have to enter it, but you would at least have gotten that information. Unless that makes everything too crazy.
Well, hopefully that person can just go ahead and enter it and just go ahead and, give them the new person a good fresh start.
Yeah.
That sound good, Jeremy?
Did we lose you, Jeremiah?
I lost my button.
You are garbly.
Yeah,
garbly.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I thought so.
Yes,
I think if they haven't updated the system by the end of the month when these are due back, we can reconvene. But my hope is over the next week or so, they will update PMT with the 2019 extensions, and it won't matter if you hold it now, you get the SAR, you put it in, and then the next person has can just roll on. Okay, well, I'm just going to hit the save and continue button. And if I clicked all the buttons and everything is in there correctly, I should be able to scroll down, mark the SAR as approved, and hit save. And that now has saved the SAR. So if you were to go into their agency profile, you would now see the SAR that we entered. And Rachel, get with me whenever you get there. So if we need to update it, I might just do it for you so we don't have to create a whole new SAR. I can go in and edit this SAR. But that's it in a nutshell. Does that make sense to everybody? What part was most confusing?
I do have a question, Renee. Is this a brand new contract or an ongoing contract? Anderson County.
It's ongoing. I just put new so that I would recognize that it was my fake one.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So, but But yeah, just for our purposes, if you already have a contract number, go ahead and put it in there.
Yeah,
So then you
go ahead and
have
put
to
it in.
back later.
I was just putting new because that way, if for some reason their SAR completely changed from a couple, last year, a year before, we could just delete this. And the way you delete a SAR if you need to is, sorry, I can't see. There was a button. I guess there's not a button now. There was you could check mark and hit delete. I'll do some research on that, but hopefully you won't have to delete.
It shows up every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like I know that once I first started, if I go out, like don't finish it and go out, I can, the delete shows up. But once you
but once it's approved, it's
Yeah.
approved, you may not be
But
able to.
I think once I go into to review it again, I can delete it there.
Okay. And I would just caution you on deleting SARs because I think we came upon an issue a couple months ago when reviewing SAR data, and Melanie was tasked with it last, is several SARs that should have been in and counting toward our award were showing as deleted. So then Susan, I think they landed on French's team. Susan had to get her people to go in and recreate the SARs. So I would just caution against deleting, and if you need to delete, but making sure you delete ones that are appropriate.
Renee, you said the agencies have 30 days. If we get the first, I mean, inevitably there's going to be multiple drafts of this with them sometimes. Is that we just need the first draft from them in 30 days and then?
I say so. And really, to me, that's one of those things that we've got it outlined as 30 days. If you're working with the agency, it's up to you to make the finding or make an issue out of it. We're getting a little late jump start on it. It's already halfway through July. So, I will leave that up to your supervisors or to yourself. But Claire, yeah, if you send it to them, they send it back and you're still working on it the first week of August, I wouldn't take issue with it as long as they were actively working toward getting it fixed so that you could put it in.
Okay, great.
If they're ignoring
Right,
you, like
because-
we happen to have a lot of people ignore us with closeouts. If they're ignoring you, I would see taking an issue.
Right, because the actual deadline, I believe, is 90 days. And so 30 gets us our first draft and time to make corrections.
So we have some built-in time on our end. All right. Well, if no other questions,
Oh, Renee,
Amy was going to send out that thing that she was going to look for with the expanded information on question 11.
It's
I
actually
can
in the
send out-
chat, Renee.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I'm still sharing my
Valerie
screen.
posted it for us. Thanks, Valerie.
Can you put the path for the document?
I'll email that out because I actually have it on my desktop, but I'll
Okay,
just
I'm gonna
email
add
it to
it
everybody
my-
and you
to
can
my
save it.
notes. Okay.
All right, guys. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, ask your supervisor. And I hope y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Who
Renee.
needed these notes for their team? So I know who to send them to.
Just download the recording and save it, and we can send it out to everybody if we need to.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Renee.
Bye.
You're welcome. Bye.